recording. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. There are two psukim that appear in this week's parsha that, according to many, are a chumash b'fnei atzmo. They're surrounded by parentheses, so to speak, nun hafucho, and they have no relationship to what is written before them or what is written after them. It's just like inserted. So therefore, there are many meforshim that say that there really is an extra chumash. These two psukim are the extra chumash. Chumash Bamidbar is therefore made up of three chumashim. One until Vayibin Soa, then Vayibin Soa Uvenucha Yomar is the second chumash, and the third chumash is beginning Vayom Kibisomani. So, what do these two psukim teach us? Why are they, so to speak, highlighted in the Torah? And there are many explanations as to this emphasis on these two psukim. But the one that registered at least most to me is that these two psukim are the bookends of the Jewish story. They're the story of the Jewish people. There's one story, Vayibin Soa, and then there's another story, Uvenucha Yoma. Chazal say that the word Vayi ain't not Vayi Alaloshon Tzorah. Vayi indicates an anxiety, a problem, difficulty. So before she pointed out, anyone who studies the Jewish story knows that the Torah has never been permanent in any one place. In fact, the state of Torah is always Vayibin Soa. It's always traveling, it's always moving. And the centers of Torah therefore change throughout the Jewish world and throughout the generations. The original center of Torah naturally was in Eretz Yisrael. I mean, first it was in the Midbar with Moshe, but when they crossed over into Eretz Yisrael, the center was with Yoshua the Skadim, and it was in Eretz Yisrael. Then came the Churban Bayis Rishon. When the Churban Bayis Rishon occurred, there were two main exiles. The vast majority of the exiles went to Babel under Nebuchadnezzar, originally under Sancheriv, and then under Nebuchadnezzar. And the minority, but it was a sizable minority, including the Navi Yirmiyahu, went to Egypt. So now there were two centers of Torah. One center was Babel, and the other center was what later became Alexandria. And the interesting thing about Torah is that it's competitive. And therefore, each of the centers vied with each other for primacy. The center in Alexandria went to such lengths that they even built the Beis HaMikdash there. The Mikdash Shulchanio. And that had operated for almost 2 centuries. There was a parallel Beit HaMikdash to the one in Yerushalayim. And after a while, the Alexandrian Jews said, we're the real Beit HaMikdash. And they developed their center of Torah, as did Bavel. When Ezra returned with his 40,000 followers there to Israel at the beginning of the Bayis Sheni, so he established the Anshe Knesses Hagdolah, which moved the center of Torah, moved the Oram back to Eretz Yisrael. And for the next 400, it's really more than 400 years, really 600, maybe close to 700 years, the Torah center of Eretz Yisrael was dominant. And even though the Bavli was, it is much larger, it studied much more, and to a certain extent is more authoritative than the Yerushalmi, because the later generations did not decide halacha according to the Yerushalmi. Tosfos quotes the Yerushalmi as a source, but not as a halachic imperative. And therefore, the Torah of Bavel became preeminent. The great yeshivas in Bavel, Rav and Shmuel, the Amoraim, finally the editing of the Talmud by Ravina and Ravashi. So the center of Torah was now in Bavel. And it remained in Bavel for a few hundred years. The period of the Golim. The Jewish people, however, began to scatter. And especially with the rise of Islam in the 7th century, so Jews moved all over the Mediterranean basin together with the Muslim conquerors. So Jews came to North Africa. So Fez in Morocco became a center of Torah. And from Morocco, they came to Spain. And you had the great centers of Torah in Spain, Cordoba, Toledo, Barcelona, Girona, where the great yeshivas were, and the great Rishonim were. The Rambam returned to Egypt in the 12th century, and he made Egypt again the center of Torah. And because there was no sizable Jewish population in the land of Israel any longer, so Vayibn Salah Oram, the Oram traveled all over the world. When they were exiled from Spain, traveled all over the Mediterranean basin. From Bavel, the Babylonian Jews were the origins of the Ashkenazic Jews. Came to France, expelled from France, expelled from England,